Welcome to SVN3E Environmental Science. We are in the midst of looking at contaminants and how they affect us and how they affect how they get into us, what's produced. And tonight we're going to look at how the human body reacts to these environmental factors, these contaminants that get into our body and what the body does. All right, so we are going to start in the booklet on page 18 of 19. That's where we are. We are at the last lesson of Unit 2, which is looked at the environment and really our impact on the environment and its impact on us really is what we've been looking at, how we affect ecosystems and then in turn how ecosystems affect us. Okay, lesson 10 then, how the human body reacts to environmental factors. And I'm just going to start at the page 19 of 19. It's the last page of Unit 2, and we're looking at Lesson 10 learning goals. And it says students will be able to identify and describe components of soil, water, and air. And the second learning goal for this lesson is describe the effects of human activity on soil, water, and air. Okay, and in turn, we're going to then tonight look at how that effect of our activity on soil, water, and air in turn affects us. And it's really important to always remember when we're looking at ecosystems that everything needs to be in balance. We've been talking about that since the first class, that our first unit was looking at us in terms of taking care of our planet, our ecosystems, making them healthy and sustainable. And by that, we mean making them available for future generations to be able to use. And what we've discovered is that we also need to be aware of what we're putting into that environment. It's really important that we have balance in the products we produce, and we haven't had that. We haven't had that for a long time now. For most of human history, we were very in balance with the ecosystems, with nature. We were really careful about not over hunting, over fishing, putting things in the environment that were in turn going to poison us, toxic chemicals. And we kind of swung really far in the other direction. Industrialization caused us to pump lots and lots of chemicals into the air, into our soil and into our water, toxins and other things that are not healthy to ecosystems, to the plants, and then in turn to the animals and us. So now we're looking at the things we put into our air, our atmosphere, our soil, our water supplies in general. Remember, water can be surface water. That's water that's in ponds and lakes and things that are above the ground. And then we have groundwater. That's water that seeps down through. We know groundwater is always thought of as, oh, well, it's groundwater, it's going to be clean. And we know from some of the material we covered that groundwater will eventually, those contaminants will get to the groundwater, that eventually it will also be filled with toxins, etc., if we are not careful. So tonight, we've looked at how these contaminants can get into the human body, and tonight we're going to look then at how the human body reacts. Now, we've already looked at that a little bit in the last class, because in the last class, if you recall, we looked at how contaminants enter the human body. So we know that the human body has many defense mechanisms that protect us from the contaminants. The different parts of our body, the different systems. We looked at the respiratory system, which is our airways, the trachea, the long hard tube that runs down to our bronchi, the two pieces that branch off of it into bronchioles, which go smaller and smaller in our lungs, and then to the end, which are called alveoli, which are the little air sacs at the end of each of the tubes, where those covered in capillaries pick up the blood in the capillaries and then get spread to the rest of the body. We talked about how that process of spreading it around the body works. We have the heart. The heart pumps blood to all parts of the body. It has to be a constant process. If your heart isn't working, then you are not living. And we know that at the end, there's capillaries again. Arteries are what carry blood that's full of oxygen and nutrients away from the heart. And then it goes through the arteries, smaller and smaller, to capillaries, where gas exchange occurs with cells, and then they get filled up with the waste products. So the good things going to the cells are oxygen, maybe some nutrients, could be also food, right? Energy from food. We'll talk about that in a second. And then it goes to the cells where it gets all distributed, picks up the waste products. Remember, carbon dioxide and water were two we mentioned last week. Picks up those waste products and brings them back to the heart, where they're pumped over to the lungs. The lungs then is where the carbon dioxide, water, waste goes out back into the lungs, and it exhaled is what we call it, through the same place into the alveoli, up into the bronchioles, to the two tubes, bronchi, back up to the trachea, and back out the nose and mouth. If you hold any sort of a little mirror, or even your hand, it'll work, and you talk or blow or breathe onto your hand or a little mirror, you'll see the fog. That is water moisture. And if you had some sort of testing apparatus, equipment, lime water is a good one. If you blow into lime water, it's clear. Lime water is a clear, colorless liquid. And if you blow into it, it turns cloudy. And that is an proof that you are blowing out carbon dioxide, the two different waste products. Okay, so that was, I mentioned also the food having energy. We get that food energy through a process called digestion. Hard time saying that today. The digestive system it starts with the mouth, where you start to chew. There's salivary glands, they're called. They put saliva, that's the wet stuff in your mouth that goes into the food. And when you chew, you break it down. You add the saliva, which also breaks down the food. You swallow it, it goes down another tube called the esophagus, that leads into your stomach. In your stomach, more chemicals are added. Remember, we talked about there being an acid that helps to kill any pathogens, bacteria, fungi, molds, anything you're eating that's not good for your body. You do not want to get in your body. And then once it's mixed up and had some of these things added, other things come. The liver produces bile, sorry, and it gets added in. Insulin from the pancreas, chemicals get added and assist in breaking down that food even more. Goes into your small intestine and through long ways through your small intestine. It's all wrapped up in there, and it gets to what's called the villi. The villi are little finger-like projections, little bumps on your all along the lining of your small intestine. And as the food passes through there, it's now in a state where it can be absorbed through the villi into the blood again into the capillaries and which carries your blood, and then distribute it all over your body. Once that digested food reaches your large intestine, the next piece of your digestive system, it takes anything left. It takes out water, any minerals that are left over that we can still get from that food we ate, and any of the wastes go through the rectum and the anus and are eliminated. Okay, so those systems we went over in great detail, and tonight we're going to see what happens when those systems are affected by some of these environmental factors. Okay, the first system we're going to go to, and we're going to go over now to the textbook. So if you give me a minute, I'm going to switch my screens to our textbook, and you'll see in just a minute that we now have page 78 of the textbook, how the human body reacts to environmental factors. Okay, so the first system is the respiratory system. And you'll see there that there's a big symbol, and figure 3.16 shows a symbol, and that's talking about exposure to ionizing radiation. If you're in an area where they're using radiation, sometimes radiation is they're using it for cancer treatments, something like that. Different types of machines that do chemical tests. Then you will see that symbol. And so it is telling you that that's one of the possible contaminants. We didn't really talk about it last class, so it's good that they did talk about it. Ionizing radiation is a type of radiation that can be very harmful. Okay, so sometimes, if you're working in somewhere where they're creating nuclear energy, you would definitely have that. The nuclear waste is what's called radioactive. So if you're storing it or you're producing nuclear energy, etc. X-rays, right? If you're getting X-rays, you're in the X-ray department of the hospital, they will have that symbol, and other types of equipment will have that symbol. But we know from last class, that wasn't the one we talked about the most. The most we talked about were airborne contaminants. So some examples of those we talked about were workplace chemicals that you might get from working with a product at your workplace. Could be something as easy as cleaning supplies, or it could be something as complex as particulate matter, maybe from remember we talked about drywalling, sanding things down, perhaps working in carpentry. There's lots of sawdust, those types of things. Those are called VOCs. VOCs, those are particulates that sometimes are in the airborne particulates. Could be pesticides if you're working and they're looking at making your, the crops healthier. It could be something where you're trying to get rid of weeds in grass, maybe get rid of dandelions or something, could be pesticides. Pathogens, remember we talked about bacteria, could be a pathogen, a virus could be pathogens, mold, all those types of things. Those are things that we can inhale. So when we're looking at this chart on table on 3.3, page 78 of the textbook, that's what we're looking at. It's going to go through what the different contaminants are, and then we're going to look at the reaction and what's the disease that's caused from this contaminant. Okay, so this first one's listed as smoke and smoking. We talked about smoke a lot because this summer we had so much smoke in so many communities from the forest fires. Even if they weren't forest fires in our part of the world, they could have been coming, the wind was blowing right from BC all the way through the country. So we could have been getting smoke from other parts of Canada even. And it was bad. It was very hard to see. And you'll see here the reactions and symptoms are eyes, nose, and throat irritation. Definitely. A lot of people complained of headaches this summer from the smoke. Also, that can cause that or anything, particulates, again, like little particles in the air. Smog, we've talked a lot about that, how smog can form. Even in a beautiful place like Calgary, Alberta, it gets smog, and ozone is produced in the smog contains ozone, which is great when it's up in the stratosphere, but not so great when it's at ground level. CO, which is carbon monoxide, SO2, which is sulfur dioxide, and then like we said, the different other contaminants that could be in there. And the disease from that is not really so much a disease as you get inflammation, I guess, is what they're saying is the disease caused from those. So not so bad. However, if you look at the second stage, now things are getting worse. Smoke and smoking is always going to be in there because those are always contaminants of air. But you'll see, along with particulate smog, SO2, and pathogens, we now have pathogens. So pathogens can cause difficulty breathing, wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, excessive mucus, that's when you're coughing up stuff, anxiety, and weakness. When you're having difficult breathing at any time, a lot of times you get weakness because you aren't getting enough oxygen. Remember, the respiratory system we just reviewed is the system that brings in oxygen and spreads it to all parts of our body. And if that's not happening not happening very effectively, then we'll get weak. And then that probably is this is probably what's causing anxiety. The diseases related to that are asthma. I have asthma. I've had it since I was a little kid. I'm much better now as an adult, so I'm not sure what happens there, that it disappeared. But it's basically, unless I'm around something that causes me to have an allergic reaction, which I also have, just lucky, born with all these. If I have an allergic reaction to a dog or a cat or horses, one time I went to Winnipeg, took my kids to it was beautiful. It was a horse show, but it was like a Cirque du Soleil horse show. It was so great. We really, really enjoyed it, except that my son and I, who have really severe allergies, pretty much sneezed and coughed through the whole entire presentation, and both had to get out our inhalers and use them. Any of you who do have any things like that affect your breathing and cause wheezing and shortness of breath probably do use an inhaler. And so that's one of the treatments. We're not going to get quite into that yet, but you'll see the diseases listed are asthma. Okay, and this is one becoming much more common today, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. A lot of people may have heard of COPD, and COPD is basically your respiratory system is not working. And so often people with that have to put on an oxygen tank, and they put the tubes from the oxygen tank into their nose, and that delivers oxygen to their body because they're not getting enough by breathing in naturally. Okay, the next contaminant listed there, along with smoke and smoking particulates, is hydrocarbons. and then pathogens. This can cause inflamed lungs and a dry cough. You know that feeling where you just cough, nothing's really happening. It's almost like a bark sometimes. You just cannot breathe properly. You feel very uncomfortable. The disease is called pneumonia, and that's where you have inflammation in your lungs, and it's very uncomfortable. You get issues again with oxygen levels, just an overall very, very uncomfortable. Um, Remember, these can all be caused just by smoking. So smoking causes a lot of these diseases as well, along with the other things listed. And smoking is definitely a contaminant we've not really talked about, but it should have been in our list. And we breathe in that smoke when we're smoking, or secondhand smoke. If we're near somebody smoking, we can actually just breathe in this contaminant directly right from the cigarette itself or from standing next to somebody smoking, and it can cause all of these that we've listed so far. Okay, the last contaminant added to our list is the ionizing radiation, workplace chemicals, arsenic, and asbestos. None of these are good for you. None of these are okay to be breathing in. Remember, we talked a lot about wearing a mask if you're around somewhere that has anything in the atmosphere you should not be breathing in. Sometimes it's hard, and maybe you aren't even aware you are, but if you are aware that there is particulate matter, smoke, any of these things, put on a mask. It will not help with ionizing radiation, however. If there's ionizing radiation, it's going right through the mask and into you. Okay, what are the reactions? Chronic cough, difficulty breathing, bloody mucus, and chest pains. This is very severe now. You do not want to be breathing in any of these contaminants. This probably could be, if it's the smoke and smoking, it's probably very long term. This wouldn't be from one smoky little summer, but this would be over years of inhaling smoke from smoking cigarettes or a workplace. And we've already talked about where you find radiation. Asbestos, we're going to talk about, we talked about, sorry, last class, that it's in older buildings, was used as insulation. And the big thing with that is not to disturb it. Do not, if there's something you know has, even if you're not sure, the best is to hire a professional and let them come and deal with it. Okay, we're going to go to page 79, the top of 79. Okay, it's not, computer is not. It's not behaving. Let me just see if I can get that to move a bit better. Okay. The next system we're going to look at that gets affected by contaminants is your digestive system. So the digestive system reacts to contaminants through the food or what you're drinking, what you ingest. Remember, that's called ingestion. Also, we know for anybody that's been out in the sun a long time, and not drinking enough water, heat can also affect your digestive system, right? You can get heat stroke from being out in the sun too long, and then you can feel very, very, very rough afterwards. Stress can affect your digestive system, making you not want to eat, perhaps taking away your appetite because you're stressed, could lead to ulcers. Ulcers are holes in your stomach lining. They can be very painful, uncomfortable. So there's all sorts of different different ways the digestive system can react to when its environment. Okay. However, most of the digestive issues are caused by pathogens. Pathogens are often low level. It's Like when you think about it, for the most part, we talked last week about, or sorry, last class about contaminants getting into the human body, and we know that there's all sorts of ways that your body tries to protect you against contaminants. So for the most part, um, we do have pathogens present. However, they don't affect us. This changes when we have unsafe condition of some sort come up. So there was an outbreak of listeria being, which is listeria is a pathogen, and there it caused a big sickness, people to get very ill, and they found out it was coming from where they were cutting up meat at a meat packing factory in Toronto. What happened was when they were cutting up and packaging the meat, the equipment wasn't cleaned properly. And as a result, the pathogen Listeria was able to grow, and it caused 22 people to die. So pathogens and that's from people who ate the meat with the pathogen in it. It got into their system. All the methods we have of killing off pathogens um, did not stop it. And as a result, 22 people died. So those places are regulated quite closely so that things like that do not happen. Okay. You'll see there's a little picture of listeria there. They pretty much all bacterial, rod-shaped, I shouldn't say all bacteria, rod-shaped bacteria. That's the shape of those type of bacteria. Will all look pretty much just like that. So I'm not sure that that's any different from any other rod-shaped bacteria we could look at, but it is kind of cool to know that that is the pathogen right there. They're very small. Those are not big like they show in the picture there. Figure 3.17 on page 79. They're not big like that. They're actually microscopic. That means you'd need a microscope to be able to see them. And that's the problem with pathogens, is often they're so small. You can't even see that your food, your water, whatever you're taking in is even affected. Okay, the contaminants or factors are listed in table 3.4, the reactions or symptoms that you get from that contaminant, and then what you call the disease that causes that. Okay, a pathogen can cause intestinal pain. That means pain in your gut, vomiting, throwing up, cramps, diarrhea, bloody stool. Stool is feces. So blood in your feces, okay? These are all a symptom that you had a pathogen enter your system and is now causing all this discomfort. The diseases associated with that are cholera, giardia, and dysentery. Okay, those are the names of 3 diseases that can be a result of a pathogen. Very uncomfortable. We call this food poisoning. The common name for this is food poisoning. This is when you eat something that does not agree with you. I've had this happen. I was living in South America, in Colombia, and one of the things is, I will just tell you, if you're going to do some traveling, is when you travel, try to eat what the locals eat, because obviously they're not getting sick and it's probably fresh because it's getting eaten right away. However, as a foreigner in a strange land, sometimes you just want something closer to home. So I went to a restaurant that had something a little more Canadianized food, Americanized food, and I ate there. And then about 6 hours, I'm going to say, till it fully kicked in, till I was very, very, very sick. So you have to be careful that also, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment where I can't remember what we covered and what we're going to cover. Things need to be kept at a certain temperature, right? Foods. And if it's the type of food that creates a pathogen, if it's not kept at a certain chemical, you just want to be really, really, really careful that you don't um, eat that and then get that pathogen in you. So I ate something, I was very ill. Another time we passed through a little restaurant on the way to the airport one time. This was in Canada. And at the time we were late and we were trying to get to to the airport the next morning, and we stopped a little restaurant, and my son, who was just little guy, wasn't quite two, wouldn't eat, which I think back to it now and think, thank goodness. But we ate, and a few hours later we were so sick, and we had intestinal pain, we were vomiting, we had cramps, diarrhea, and it was bad. And I really believed I was going to die. That's how sick I was. We did survive. We woke up the next morning. My son was happy as could be and was watching TV all night and quite happy his parents were occupied and not paying too much attention to what he was up to. And he was happy and healthy. However, we were very sick. We had to get up. We had to take some medications that we could to stop the diarrhea and vomiting, and we had to hop on a plane and fly to Miami. We were heading to South America. So there you go. It can happen in Canada. It can happen. So the important, and that was from, I believe, gravy, if I'm not mistaken, late at night gravy that had probably sat there far too long. We shouldn't have been eating that late at night. And yeah, it was just all, that's an example of a pathogen affecting you. The next one listed is alcohol and drug abuse, and it's next to workplace chemicals. So, alcohol is considered a contaminant to the body. It is a poison. It is toxic in great amounts, as anybody who has taken too much alcohol in and felt the effects the next day. The effects are nausea. It means feeling like you're going to get sick, fatigue, tiredness, weight loss. You can have weight loss from drug abuse in particular. You can go into a coma and you can suffer kidney failure. These can all be the effects of alcohol and drug abuse or workplace chemicals. The disease for really, really abuse to your body with alcohol and drug abuse, it in particular affects your liver. Why is that? The reason for that is because remember we talked about how your liver tries to protect you and how it does this by removing toxins from your blood. So when you drink or do drugs or inhale something, or I'm sorry, not inhale, these are digestive. So if you have something on your hands that you then by accident put on food and eat, um, that is hard on your liver because it's trying to clean your blood and it causes cirrhosis. That's there on page 79, CIRRHOSIS, cirrhosis. And cirrhosis of the liver it can lead to liver failure. It can be very, very hard on your body. And if you stop, being exposed to alcohol, drugs, or workplace chemicals, whatever's causing that, sometimes it has a chance to recuperate, sometimes not. And eventually it will fail. And then toxins build up in your body and it will kill you. Okay, the contaminant listed next is listeria. We've already talked about it. Some of those symptoms, we never talked about this, are fever, rash, nausea, headaches, exhaustion, shock, collapse, and your circulatory system fails. Remember, your circulatory system is your heart pumping blood through your arteries into your capillaries and then to every single cell in your body. and then coming back through your veins and back to the heart again. So that is your system. And if it's failing, then you know that that is not going to be good. You are not going to survive circulatory failure. That remember, your heart has to continually beat all the time. That heart from the minute you are in your conceived and it develops. I'm not sure. Let's look that up actually. When does the heart develop? It will develop at what stage does the heart form? Let's try that and see what comes up with. The heart begins to form around 18 to 19 days after fertilization. So from the time you're inside your mom, you're not even born yet, and you're still inside there at around 18 to 19 days, the heart starts to develop. It begins beating at around week 7. Week 7, inside your mom, your heart starts to beat. From that moment until the end of your life, your heart beats, and it has to. That's how we get all nutrients, waste, everything pass through our body, right? So it's an amazing mechanism. And if you do drugs and overdo alcohol, or you get a chemical at your workplace, it can cause um, that to happen. Um, sorry, and also listeria. We were talking actually about listeria. That's why the people at the in Toronto that were eating the meat, well, I'm not sure if they were in Toronto. The meat was probably distributed elsewhere, but 22 people died because their circulatory system failed. Okay, the next one has a big name there, Escherichia, coli. That is E. coli. E. coli, a lot of people would have heard of. We talked about this earlier when we were talking about water, having E. coli in it in a little town in southern Ontario, and that many people got sick, some people died from E. coli being put into the water. The reactions to E. coli are fevers, chills, pain, shock, diarrhea. And that disease is called septicemia. And it can be very, very fatal if it's not treated and caught early enough. So sometimes people will there will be a what do you call those? An announcement, a public service announcement saying, don't eat, whatever. I believe there was one, was it on melons? I think cantaloupes. I believe it was cantaloupes, right? That there were had E. coli in them. I think there was also one for I believe it was romaine lettuce also. And there was big things, everybody saying, take it off the shelves. Supermarkets, grocery stores had to take it off the shelves, couldn't sell it because it had E. coli. E. coli can be very, very harmful to the digestive system. And so we try to prepare our food in a way that it's cooked properly, refrigerated properly, whatever we're doing to make sure that E. coli does not, along with the other pathogens listed above. It's not the only one. It's just a specific one that we do hear about when it comes to digestive systems. We've got the workplace chemicals again and drugs. Another reaction from those is vomiting, diarrhea, trouble breathing, headache, and intestinal pain. So you can see that this one here crosses over into two different systems. Yep, it's affecting the digestive system, also affecting the respiratory system. So drugs can be very, very harmful to the digestive system, and they can also then at the same time be affecting your respiratory system. Even though you might not have inhaled the drug, it might not have entered through the lungs, whatever you've eaten whatever you've taken, as you know, ingested, we say that is eaten. It has now not only affecting your digestive system, it's also affecting your respiratory system. The disease here says heavy metal poisoning. Um, and I would say also drug overdose, they could have listed as well. That's called drug overdose, right? When you're having those many. Depending on what drug you're on, that you took, sometimes you can take the spray, the nasal sprays, and it will counter effect the drug you've taken. Sometimes not. Depends on what you've taken. So you've got to be super careful. Whatever you put into your system, be very careful. If you do not have that spray, I'm having a moment thinking, I believe it's called Narcan. But let me just look and see if it's called Narcan. Uh, Naloxone. Naloxone is called Narcan here in Canada. And it's a spray. If you don't have any at your workplace or your school, you should get some. If anybody's having an opioid overdose. So then the question is, what's opioids? Let me give you a list. Let me just look up some technical opioids. Morphine, fentanyl, oxycodone. Those are opioids. And if somebody is overdosing on those, and the thing is with some of those, especially fentanyl, you only have to take a very little bit of it in order to have a very severe effect. So if you suspect that somebody has overdosed and it is an opioid overdose, even if it isn't, you can still give them the Narcan. It will not do anything bad if it's not an opioid overdose. If it's another, it will not do anything bad. You will not harm the person, but it is very smart to give that to somebody you suspect is having an overdose. And at the same time, um, I guess there's heavy metal poisoning here too, which is something you would have in a workplace chemical. It would not affect that unless it was in the opioid classes of chemicals. The last one in our table on 3.4 is alcohol abuse, smoking, and workplace chemicals. Okay, that's the second time now we've got alcohol abuse in our chart. In this time, we've really gone to the extreme now. The second one, where they were talking about nausea, that was just if you had maybe one night of too much alcohol. However, now and then if you have too much of that, it does lead to cirrhosis. However, now we're talking about even longer, maybe, because yep, cirrhosis is one effect. This one here says alcohol abuse, smoking, workplace chemicals, the reactions, trouble swallowing, your esophagus, right? Remember, that's the tube that goes from the mouth and the food travels down your esophagus into your stomach. So you have trouble swallowing, your esophagus has been affected. There's weakness, weight loss, back pain, and clay-colored stools. That means your pancreas has been affected. Clay, what color is that? Kind of like a grayish color, eh? A kind of light brown grayish color. That's what your feces are looking at, like when you go to the bathroom. Um, it says here that the diseases are cancer of the esophagus, also called esophageal cancer, and cancer of the pancreas. So neither of these is something you want to get. If you can stop abusing alcohol, and if you can stop smoking, now is the time to do it. It is very important that any of those things, if you're able to, there's all sorts of different programs you can reach out to for help to stop those. There's stop drinking programs. There's also programs to stop Smoking, that's an issue. And definitely, if you're getting these effects from workplace chemicals, you have every right not to work with dangerous chemicals. You have the right to refuse dangerous work in a workplace. You have the right to, unless you're in a workplace where it's expected, like if you're a paramedic, firefighter, police officer, nurse, like in those particular cases, you do have to sometimes work in dangerous environments, and that's different. That's expected of the situation you're in that workplace to work in those environments. However, if it's a chemical you're being exposed to, something making you sick, and you're not given either one, the proper training and proper equipment, or two, the right to not do that work, you need to report that. And that's under the Ministry of Labor that you go to for that. And what you want to be very careful is that you are not um, having any long-term damage that's going to cause some of these diseases. Cancer of the esophagus, I do know somebody that had it. It started off by just some trouble swallowing. And what happens is that your esophagus, that tube that runs from your mouth to your stomach, can get blocked, perhaps by a tumor. And when that happens, then you need to, then you're going to start having problems swallowing. If you have any of those issues, you have trouble swallowing, you're feeling weak, you have weight loss, it's a huge sign, probably related because you're having troubles eating and swallowing, back pain, or again, if anytime your stool changes color from what it ordinarily is, I know it sounds strange, but it's not a bad idea to look in the toilet after you go to the washroom. You want to be checking that everything's healthy, that you don't have any issues there. And with anything changing colors, any blood, that type of thing. If you do go to the hospital or the nursing station, the clinic, whatever you have in your community, and you really do need to get that checked out right away, because that can lead to some very serious long-term diseases like cancer of the esophagus and cancer of the pancreas. Okay, so that's ways your digestive system can react from contaminants in food. We look at the bottom of page 79, and we're going to go right to question 2 at the bottom of page 79. Question 2 says, what digestive diseases can result from workplace chemicals? So you can see in the chart that there's a couple of workplace chemical contaminants listed there. Alcohol and drug abuse workplace chemicals is the second thing listed in the chart, and you can see the disease listed there. Also has workplace chemicals. The second one, you'll see what the disease is there. And then the last line of the chart's also workplace chemical. You can see the diseases listed there. So I guess technically, if you wanted to look at the effect of Listeria and E. coli as another workplace chemical, those are technically, I suppose, when we think about the meat processing factory, it did have Listeria in the factory. I'm not sure if anybody in the factory was affected, or if it was the people eating the meat that was packaged and processed at the factory. Same with E. coli. I suppose if you wanted to include that disease that's caused by disease from E. coli, you could also, however, the ones listed from the actual workplace chemicals are the ones we want to have included. And you can see that, or I'm looking, and yes, question 2 is worth 1 mark. If you're not sure what questions to do, let's just quickly go back and talk about that once more because people do have a hard time with this, figuring out what they're supposed to be doing for questions. Okay, I'm back over at the booklet, and you can see hopefully that I'm on page 19 of 19. And it will start the lesson by giving us our learning goals, which we did. And then it tells us where the information is in the textbook. You'll see at the top it says there's information on page 78 to 85. And then you'll see it tells us where the questions are. The check your understanding questions are always listed first. So you'll see page 79, do questions. Sorry, I said there was only question 2. I didn't realize that question 1 was listed there. See, that's why you go over to this page here and get your list of questions. So actually it's got listed here on page 19 that we were supposed to do page 79, question 1 and 2. All right, we went back and looked, isn't it? Because now we're going to go back over to our textbook and let's go have a look at question number 1 was. Sorry about that. Okay, we over in the textbook, page 79. You should be able to see that on your screen. And it says question 1, what is the most common contaminant that can affect the respiratory system? Okay, I would say if you wanted to look at table 3.3, that's probably what you could use to answer that question. If you go back and instead of just looking at what the most common contaminant is, it might not specifically state it in the reading. So what you could do instead is go back to table 3.3. It has lots of contaminants listed there. Look at the one that comes up the most often. You can list that as the most common contaminant. And that question's worth 1 mark. All right, that takes us halfway through lesson number 10. And we are almost done unit 2. So next class, when I join you again, we are going to go on with the second half of lesson 10 in your unit 2. And it'll be the last one of looking at how we are affected in this particular case by contaminants in the ecosystem. Ones that we put there, I might add. Always remember, most of these contaminants are human created in the first place. So like I say, there's that interaction between us putting things out there and then having them come back and affect us. It's been great having anybody listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow night. Thank you very much for joining me.